Hi there once again, and welcome to the second tutorial in this three-part series on building a mechanical arm. And in this one we're going to be focusing on building this, which is the claw piece. We're going to do it from scratch, and we're going to be using a combination of Expresso and an IK rig in order to drive this, and we'll control it via a couple of user data sliders. That's what we're about in this tutorial, so without further ado, let's see if we can make this happen. The first element I'm going to bring into the scene is a cylinder. So I'll grab one of those. I'll give it a radius of 32, a height of 5, a single height segment and 60 rotation segments. In my caps, I'll add a fillet and I'll make it 1 centimetre. I'm just going to hit O so that we can see the object. And I'll also change my display to Garrett shading lines, and I've got it in isopalms, which is fine. So that's the first element of our claw in the scene. Moving on from here, we need to add brackets, and to do that I'm going to get a cube and I'm going to give it dimensions of 2 in the X, 2 in the Y and 6 in the Z. I'm going to move it down a little bit so that we can see it, and I'll just go underneath there so that we're there. Hit O so that we see the whole object. Okay, great. We'll make this editable. Select my polygon mode, and I'm going to select this polygon and this one for now. Hit D for extrude, and we do want to go 6, so we'll apply that, and that gives us the 2 wings of our bracket. And then I can select this polygon here and D for extrude again, and this time I'm going to go 2 and then do a new transform and give that a value of 6 once again. So now we can see that we've got the basic shape of our first bracket. I'm going to throw this into a subdivision surface, so hold down the Alt key and hit the subdivision, and now we've got an interesting shape in our scene. If I select my cube and then select edge mode, UL for loop selection, I can start work with this. Now I'm going to work with this particular loop, this one, change my display to lines and then select this top loop as well, and then come back into Garrett shade lines and hold down the full stop key on my keyboard and click and drag, and that's looking quite nice. But we still need to work with our loops here and here, that one. So hold down the full stop again, click and drag, and now we've got a good shape for our first bracket. That looks great. Okay, let's just zoom out so that we can see that in context, and we can see that it's a good scale. Moving on from here, we actually need 3 brackets, and to make them I'm going to use an array. So I'll bring an array into the scene, throw my subdivision into it, and we can see that we've got something going on which isn't quite correct. For a start, we only need 2 copies, and we need a radius of just 20. And now we can see that our brackets are in the correct places. They just need lowering down until they're just about touching. Let's just go into a side view, so F3, and we can bring these down just by eye as per usual to somewhere around there, and that will be fine. And they're all facing in the correct direction. So that's great. We've got our first few elements of our claw in the scene, and everything's working quite nicely. You can, if you wish, add a bevel deformer into this to add some nice roundings on the edges of the brackets, but I'll leave that to you. And again, you can put nuts and bolts and things like that in. I'm not going to go that far with the modelling. There's no real need to. But if you wish to do that, that's fine. You can do it. Moving on from here, we need to start building the fingers. What I'm going to do, I'll bring in a null object, place it at the bottom here, and this will be used as a placeholder for our first finger. You'll see why I'm doing this a little bit later. Next thing to do is get another cylinder. Grab this one in. I'm going to orientate it differently. I'm just going to, for now, plus X. Give it a radius of 1.4. A height of 6. Single height segment and 60 rotation segments. I'm just going to move this down and see what I've got. Yeah, that'll do nicely actually. That can be placed somewhere there. And it's in the middle of our scene at the moment, but what I'm going to do is bring it over and place it in this bracket over here. And that looks good. I mean, again, most of this can be done, well, in fact, all of it really can be done by eye. You don't have to do anything clever with any of this. You can if you wish to be mathematically perfect, but there's really no need. By eye will work fine. And that's good. I mean, what we can also do on the caps, we can just put a fillet and maybe make it, I don't know, 0.2, just so that there's a little bit of a fillet on it. Yeah, I mean, I think that's fine. That looks really good. So moving on from here, I'll grab a rectangle. I'm going to group it into my cylinder. I was going to move both these down and place them in the null there. And this will need to be set up. Now I'm going to give it a width of 8. And I'm going to give it a height of 24. Let's just see where that is. Okay, so that needs to be zeroed out. So we'll just zero this out so that it's in the center of the cube, sorry, the cylinder. And I'm going to change the orientation to ZY. And that's great. So let's just move this down. And again, I'm going to do all of this by eye. Just going to move it down and I'm going to say rounding. Check that. So that's perfectly good. And then just bring this over here. Change my view to an in view this time. So F4. Hit O for object. And I'm just going to bring that in until it's just outside the rounding. That should do perfectly well for that. Okay, that's the first little bit of it done. Let's just see where it is in relation. So F3. Yeah, we just want to move it up a little bit. Move it up to about there. That should do fine. Yeah, that'll work. And then moving on from here, we can get some circles. I just need 2 of those. So I'll bring the first one in. Again, I'll drop that into my cylinder, zero it out, put it in a ZY plane, and in fact I'll place it inside my rectangle and then I can zero these out there. Just zero that out. Make the circle much, much smaller. It wants to be the same size or just a little bit bigger than the cylinder there, so we can make this 1.5 and that should be okay. And then we can just bring that up until it's level with that. It's going to view 3 so that we can see, so F3 I should say. Side view, just zoom in a little bit. It's a little bit too big actually, so let's make it a little bit smaller. Let's go down to 1.42 so that it's just outside the cylinder, and that should do nicely for that. I think that'll work okay. I'll command drag to produce another circle, place that down at the bottom of here, go into my side view once again, object, so O for object, and let's just see what we've got. Can perhaps move that down just a little bit more somewhere around there. And again, as I say, all by eye, it's absolutely fine. And that's great, that looks good. So that's given us the first part of our finger. Take this out of there. Actually, it looks as if I didn't copy that circle. Let's just drag another one so that we bring that one back up there. Is it not allowing me to copy circles? It might be because I'm in the wrong mode. It might be to switch that off a minute. Let's just see if I can copy now. Yeah, okay. So I had the axis tool switched on. I didn't need that. That's okay. Let's just make sure we're in the right plane there then. Somewhere there is good. Just go into that first circle, just put it back in the right position, which is around there. Okay, all good. Yeah, lovely. So what we can do now then is just remove the circles from the rectangle. And we can select all three objects. And in our spline, we can say conversion, connect objects, and delete. So now we've got a single object. And that's great because that's what we need for the next stage of this. And we need to drop this into an extrude. So I'll hold down the Alt key, hit the extrude. Straight away it's too big. We just need 2 centimeters in there. And that's perfectly good. And we can see that that's pretty much where it needs to be. No, I don't think I even really need to adjust that at all. No, that's fine. That's exactly where it needs to be. So that's the first side of the first joint of our finger. So what we can do next is command drag to copy this and then simply move the copy to the other side. And again, that's in pretty much the perfect position. So that's the first joint of our first finger. The next step is to bring in another cylinder. So I'll bring one of those in and I'm going to group it into the first cylinder. Again, I'm going to make it 1.4, height of 6, 1 height segment and 60 rotation segments. I'll zero it out in the cylinder and I'll change it to +X. And now I can move it down into position. Again, by eye, I'm not going to bother being too pedantic about this. Just go into my side view, hit object, and I'll just move that up until it's looking as if it's in the right place, which is about there. Again, we'll give this a fillet of 0.2 and that'll work nicely for us. So that's all good, and we can bring this beneath our 2 extrudes there. So that's our cylinder there. Moving on from here, what we need next is going to be another rectangle. And again, I'm going to drop this into our second cylinder. I'm going to make it 8 and 24. Put it in a ZY plane and zero it out. Add rounding. Let's just make sure of where we are. Not reverse, rounding. That's great, that's fine. And then again, we can just drop this down. And I'll go into the M view. Let's just move that up a little bit because it's not quite in the right place. Somewhere around, again, by eye is fine. Somewhere around there, absolutely fine. I think that'll work okay. I'm not going to bother putting a circle in this and making a hole through it because we're not going to see that, so we'll leave it as it is. And we're going to make this rectangle editable because we need to do some point manipulation. So the next thing we need to do is switch to point mode and start doing some work with this. So what I need to do first is go into my spline and say tangents equal tangent length. That gives us 2 there that are exactly the same. And then what we can do is select these 3 and just bring them in. And I've got an extra point there and I need to get rid of that point, so I'm going to just do that. Just delete it. Select them once again. Bring them in. So they're somewhere about there. And we'll just zoom in a little closer and just see where we are. See what we're getting. Yeah, so what I need to do is simply select this point and just drag this in just a little bit and do the same with this one. That gives us the shape that we want. Very nice. Yeah, that's going to work perfectly well. Now at the moment it's in the center of the cylinder there. What I'm going to do then is move this on the X. I just want to move it plus, I'm going to say 0.08 plus 1. And that should put it in more or less the right place. It might be a little bit out, so we can just move it back a tad. And then all I'm going to do is hold down my Alt key and click on the extrude to place an extrude there. Make it 2. And we now have the first finger completely built. It might be a little bit, you might need to move a little bit to its left, I think, just to make it put in the right position. So let's just move it there. That's fine. That'll do nicely. Okay, so that completes the building of the first finger. There's a few adjustments we need to make here and there, and that's what we're going to do next. Now at the moment, this extrude isn't quite in the right position. It actually needs to be in the center of this cylinder here for it to be in the correct position. So I'm going to select my axis tool there, and in this Y I'm going to zero this out, and now it's in the right position. So that's corrected that, and that's perfect. We're doing that because if it was down here, the IK when I add that wouldn't work properly, so that's important. The next thing to do is bring in another null. We'll put this inside the extrude, and I'll just put the rectangle above it, and this is going to be placed at the tip of the finger. So I'm going to zero everything out again and then drag this down until it's somewhere around the tip. Let's just go into our M view again and just make sure of what we're doing here. Somewhere there, that will be fine. So that's all set up, and this hierarchy is now correct. So I'm going to call this finger 1. And this is now correct, and it's ready for its IK tag. Before I go there though, I'm also going to get hold of this and rename it joint, or rather bottom joint I'm going to call this. And this one top joint. That gives us an idea of where we are. Now this one here, I'm going to rotate backwards by a little tiny bit, and then I'll rotate this one until it's just about pointing directly towards the ground. Something like that, that's fine. So that's like an initial start position that I've given this. Another adjustment I need to make, actually, I need to remove this from finger 1, drop finger 1 into this bottom joint and zero it out, because it no longer needs to be in the center of the world there. That's perfectly good. So we can remove finger 1 from there and then drop this back in, and now everything is where it needs to be. What we could also do is bring another null in, select everything, drop it into there, and we'll call this claw. Now let me just go into my side view. Yeah, and I want claw in actual fact to be somewhere around there. That'll be fine. Great, so that's done that. Come back out of axis mode there. Brilliant. So the next thing to do is select finger 1 and add an IK tag. This null I'm going to call end. Select my IK tag again, and I'm going to drag that into the end of the IK tag there. And we need to add an end goal, so we'll add one of those. Let's see if we're getting anything. Have we got any IK? Yes, we have. There we go. And our IK is now working. Is it working correctly? Let's just make sure. It's not quite, is it? So let's just put it back. And I can see why that's not working. It's because we've got our end is not quite in the right place and our end goal is not quite in the right place. We need to drag those over and put them in the center of our finger here. Let's just go into our side view and let's get that corrected. So let's do that. That needs to be, that's what I'll tell you what we'll actually do. We'll zero that out on the X, and that should be correct. Now let's see if it works. So we'll get a hold of our end goal, and now we've got it. Now it's working perfectly well. Yep, that's looking great. Okay, fantastic. Right, moving on from here, we need to copy our finger. In fact, we need 2 copies of our finger. I'll get a null, drop my finger into the null, and also drop my end goal into the null. Just move that above it. I can then just close this null up. I'll make a copy. In fact, I'll do 2 copies. Select my first one and rotate 120 degrees. Select my second one and rotate 240 degrees. And there we have it. We've got our 3 fingers. So now what we can do is just bring the fingers and the goals back into where they were within the claw. So just close that up. Select both these 2 elements and drop them in there. Just move the array back to where it was. Same thing again. Grab these 2 elements, drop them there, and repeat the process once again. Drop them just under there. And then we can get rid of the nulls. They've served their purpose. Fantastic. So now we've got finger 1, we've got finger 2, and if we open this one up, we've got finger 3, and they all work perfectly well. That's great. So they're all doing what they should be doing. We've got all our end goals and they all move. Yeah, fantastic. So that's good. So that's the next step complete. Moving on from here then, to finish this off, we're going to need to create a controller, and we'll make that work by using some Expresso and user data. The first thing I need to do is bring in an end side, and I need to set it in as an XZ plane. I'll just zoom out a little bit so that we can see what we're doing. It needs 3 sides, and it needs to be around 25 in its radius. We'll just bring it down to somewhere here for now. It's not quite in the right position. Let's go into our top view and see where we are. Let's rotate this by 90 degrees. And now that's correct. So it's now pretty much aligned with the bottom parts of our fingers there, the tips of our fingers, I should say. So that's great. That's really good. That's in the correct position. Now the end side needs to be made editable, so I'll hit C to make it editable, and we're going to call this controller. Okay, that's great. We'll just move it below the claw, and it's ready to go. What we'll do, as we've got it here, we now need to think about what we're going to be using it to do. So obviously it has 3 points, and I want to pass the positions of each of these points to the positions of our end goals for our fingers. And that's how we're going to use this to control the actual motion of the claw. So we can obviously move this up and down. That will give us one type of motion, and we can also alter the scale, and that will give us another type of motion. So we can use this to clench the actual claw. So that's what we're going to be using in order to make this happen. And this is where we need to start working with Expresso and user data. Let's add another null, and we'll call this one Expresso, and give it an Expresso tag. Right, okay, let's see where we are. First thing I'm going to do is bring in an iteration. So I'm going to come down to iterator, iteration. Its start will be 0, and as we've got 3 points, the end will be 2. Let's just view that at 100%. Great. The next thing I need to do is bring in my controller, give it an object port, and we'll bring in a point node. Our object will of course be the controller, and our indexes will be controlled by the iteration. We don't need to do anything more there. In fact, we don't need to do anything at all with the point node. We've got all the ports that we need because we're just interested in getting this point position. The next thing to do is bring in a link list, and we need to populate this with the end goals. So what I'm going to do is start renaming them. Let's have a look, see what I've got. So finger 1, I've got end goal. I'm just going to put a 1 on the end of that one. Here, just a 2, and obviously a 3 for our third end goal. So that's great, they're all done. So in my link list, I can just get a hold of the arrow and grab end goal 1, end goal 2, and end goal 3. And that's those sorted out, and I can plumb the iteration into the index there. All I then need to do is bring in end goal 3, give it an object port, and give it a position port. In fact, it needs to be a global position port, so I'll take that away. Coordinates, global position. That's what I need in there, and I can place that at the top. And now we're ready to go. I'm not going to do anything yet because I've still got something else to do. I need to add my user data. So I'm going to do that. In fact, what I can do, it doesn't matter. I can plumb these in. It won't make any odds. It should just snap them into position and everything will be okay. Yeah, then you can see what it's done. You can see they've all moved, and now they are lining up with the points of the end side there. So it's doing its job. Our controller is definitely doing its job. If we start adjusting this, you can see that it's actually going to work. And if we move it up and down, again, you can see that it's going to do its job perfectly. That's brilliant. So what we need to do in order to finish it off is add our user data, give ourselves a couple of sliders, and then we can see how this thing operates. Before we move on, I'm just going to hold down my Alt key with the controller selected and add another null. So now that's inside there, and that's perfectly good. We can just drag this up and place it inside the claw. I've done this because I need to zero the controller out. If I just close this down a second, I do need this controller to be zeroed out because I want it to work from ground 0 and then move up to a maximum of 17. So that's why I've done that. And then we can think about putting our user data on our claw. So I'm going to add some user data. I'm going to call this one lift. It will be a float. I will want a float slider for the interface and a real value for the unit. The step, I'm going to use 0.1. As I've said, I want a minimum value of 0 and a maximum of 17, and we'll slider max and min, we will clamp those values. A default value of 0 is fine, so we'll leave that where it is and say that's okay. The next thing to do, I'm just going to command drag to copy this user data here, and I'm going to call this one clench. Again, all of these controls are set up, so the data type, the interface, the unit, we don't need to change those. I will change this to 0.01, and I want a minimum of 0.1 and a maximum of 1.5 because we're controlling scale with this. And we'll leave that as it is, just make sure that we've got those set up the way they need to be. So 0.1. I've had a few issues with this, so I just wanted to make sure. 1.5. Okay, that looks as if it's going to work out okay. So then we can just hit OK, and we've got our user data sliders set up and ready to go. In order to get these into the Expresso, we simply need to drag in our claw. We'll just move everything to the right, just put the claw over here. Come down to user data, and we can say lift and clench, and we've got those two in. The controller, we can then say that we want position Y, and we also want scale. We'll just make that bigger so that we can see where we are. And then all we need to do is connect the lift to the position Y, the clench to the scale. We'll close down the Expresso, and we can see that it's already doing something. Let's see if it's working correctly. So let's see what we've got. So the clench is currently at 0.001 or 0.001. So that will be its smallest size. So that's doing exactly what we'd expect it to. So if we just bring that out to about 1 for now. I mean, we could set 1 as the default, but we'll leave it at 0.01. It doesn't matter really. And then we can use the lift, and we can move the thing up and down, and we can still control it via the clench as well. So it's giving us a high degree of control over what we can do actually. And you can see that it's going to work really nice when we start to work with animation. So yeah, it's all working very, very nicely, and it's going to give us exactly what we need. So we'll set that up. I think we'll set it up at say 3 and 1 as our start position. Yeah, and that looks really good. So that would do for a sort of initial position. We're not going to be doing any animation in this tutorial, but we will be doing that in tutorial number 3. Before we move on, it's worth noting that should you require more fingers, it's actually really easy to set this up, because all you've got to do is come into your brackets here, add a couple more copies in there, and that gives you 6 brackets ready for their fingers. And then all you've got to do is copy these, rotate them into position, they're ready to go. Your end sides, you'd need to give 6 sides, of course, because we've only got 3 at the moment. And then all you need to do is go into your Expresso. Your iteration needs an end of 5, and you need to add the other end goals into here, into the link list, and that's all you really need to do in order to make this work. Anyway, let's move on and get this thing wrapped up. So we'll close everything down, copy these 2, and then I'm going to paste them into tutorial number 1, which is waiting. There we go, they're in there. Now all we've got to do is just move this into position somewhere there. Let's just go into our side view, just move in a little bit closer so we can see what we're about. And we can see that we need to bring that a little bit closer, just to about somewhere there. That'll do fine. So that's in position, and then all we have to do is get a hold of our claw and group that into our wrist. And now what we should find is that we can move this, and our claw is moving. And of course, if we start to move this, our claw will move along with our wrist, or with our sleeve I should say. So yeah, it's all working exactly as we want it to, and of course our rig will allow us to change our claw's grip. It all still works, it's fully independent, so it doesn't matter where you put the claw. So yeah, that's all working perfectly well. That's fantastic. So it's going to be great for us. So that's the first two parts of this complete now, and that just about wraps this tutorial up. Hopefully you've learned a bit more and this has been worthwhile doing. And if you've enjoyed this one, please give the video a like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, and of course ring the bell. And wherever you happen to be, please share on social media, and of course you can leave a comment on the video, because all this great stuff helps the channel keep on moving in the right direction. But anyway, that does bring this one to a close, so I'll see you very shortly in part 3.